She was slapped for falling asleep. Then a cowboy pulled her close and said, "Never again." Clara had never imagined life would be this tiring. Every morning before the sun even touched the horizon, she would rise, her body already aching from the work she did the day before. The small town she lived in was surrounded by wide fields, dusty roads, and ranches that seemed to stretch endlessly toward the mountains. Clara had moved here a few months ago, hoping to find work and build a life for herself. But the reality had been far more exhausting than she had expected. The ranch where she worked was a busy place. Horses needed to be fed, fences needed to be repaired, and the endless chores never seemed to stop. Clara had grown used to waking before anyone else and falling asleep long after the stars had faded. She often felt her eyelids grow heavy, her body begging for rest, but she pushed herself, determined not to fall behind. She told herself that if she could just manage, she would prove she was capable, that she could handle the hard life of the ranch. On this particular day, Clara had been awake since before dawn. The air was cool but heavy with dust, carrying the smells of hay, leather, and the faint tang of horses. She had started by feeding the animals, moving from one stall to another, making sure each horse had enough food and water. She brushed their coats, cleaned their stalls, and checked their hoofs. Every movement required care and attention. One careless moment could lead to an injury for herself or the animals, and Clara was determined not to make mistakes. By late afternoon, the sun hung high and hot, turning the dust into a golden haze. Clara had moved on to fixing fences that had been damaged by recent winds. The work was hard, and the boards were heavy, but she didn't stop. Sweat ran down her back, and her hands were sore and blistered. Still, she kept going, reminding herself that she couldn't afford to fall behind. The other workers moved around her efficiently, calling instructions, shouting across the yard, but Clara barely noticed them anymore. All she could feel was the relentless tiredness that had settled deep into her bones. By evening, Clara had finished most of the chores, but the weight of exhaustion pressed down on her. She tried to ignore it, tried to stand tall and move quickly, but it was impossible. Her head nodded slightly as she leaned over to tie a knot on one of the fence posts. Her vision blurred, and her body ached for rest. For a brief moment she closed her eyes, intending only to blink, but the blink lasted longer than she realized. When she opened her eyes again, she felt a sharp sting on her cheek. She gasped and looked up, startled. The ranch foreman, a stern man named Mr. Harlan, stood in front of her, his face tight with anger. "Clara!" he barked. "You can't just fall asleep on the job!" She had never been yelled at like this before. The sting of his hand still tingled on her face, a sudden and harsh reminder that mistakes on the ranch were not tolerated. She tried to speak, to explain, but words seemed to vanish in the heat of the moment. I'm sorry," she stammered, her voice trembling. I was so tired. Excuses don't work here." Mr. Harlan snapped, shaking his head. "You need to pay attention. This is serious work. Horses, fences, everything. You can't just nod off because you're tired." Clara felt a lump in her throat, her eyes watered partly from the sting of his slap, but mostly from embarrassment and frustration. She had worked so hard all day, given everything she had, and yet one small lapse had caused her to be treated as if she were careless or lazy. She wanted to disappear, to run away from the yard, from the noise, from the eyes of the other workers who were now staring at her. Her hands trembled as she straightened herself, trying to collect her scattered thoughts. The ranch had seemed like a place of opportunity when she first arrived, a place where she could prove herself, learn, and grow. But now it felt intimidating, cold, and unforgiving. Every step she took felt heavy, every breath filled with doubt. She wondered if she was cut out for this life, if she truly had the strength to survive the long days and endless labor. Clara moved quietly to finish the chores that remained, her body moving on instinct rather than energy. She fed the last of the animals, checked the gates, and wiped the sweat from her face. Every movement felt like it required more effort than she had to give, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. The fear of being seen as weak pressed down on her more than the exhaustion itself. When the work was finally done, the sun was sinking behind the mountains, painting the sky in streaks of orange and pink. Clara leaned against the fence for a moment, letting her body sag with relief that the day was over. She closed her eyes, wishing she could just fall asleep there in the warm glow of the evening. The ache in her muscles, the weariness in her bones, and the weight of shame and embarrassment made her feel small, as if the world itself had grown larger and she had grown smaller. As she opened her eyes, trying to muster the courage to return to the small cabin where she stayed, Clara noticed a figure watching from a distance. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and wore the quiet confidence of someone who belonged to the land. The man's eyes were calm, yet filled with understanding. Unlike the foreman or the other ranch hands, he didn't look at her with judgment or impatience. Instead, there was a gentle concern there that made her heart flutter in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. For the first time that day, Clara felt a small spark of hope. Perhaps not everyone at the ranch was unkind. Perhaps there was someone who could see her effort, her dedication, and her exhaustion, not as weakness, but as human vulnerability. She didn't know who he was or what he thought, but simply seeing someone who didn't judge her made the weight of the day feel a little lighter. That evening, as Clara returned to her cabin, she thought about the choices she had made and the path that had led her here. She thought about the early mornings, the long days, and the moments when her body threatened to give out. She thought about the sting of Mr. Harlan's slap and the humiliation that came with it. But she also thought about the quiet figure she had glimpsed, the calm presence that seemed to offer a small measure of comfort. Lying on her narrow bed that night, Clara replayed the day in her mind. She remembered the ache in her hands, the dust in her hair, the golden haze of the sun on the fields. She remembered the sting of being slapped and the rush of shame that followed. But most importantly, she remembered the look in the man's eyes, the sense that someone could understand her struggle without criticism or anger. As she drifted into a restless sleep, her thoughts were a mixture of exhaustion and hope. She knew tomorrow would bring more chores, more hard work, and perhaps more challenges. But she also knew that somewhere in the ranch there might be someone who could see her, truly see her, and not judge her for the small mistakes she made when her body simply needed rest. For Clara, that day marked the beginning of a journey of learning to trust again, of discovering kindness in unexpected places, and of understanding that even in the harshest environments, human compassion could exist. She didn't know what the future held, but she held on to a small hope that not every day would feel as heavy as this one. The next morning, Clara woke to the soft golden light of the sun spilling across her small cabin. Her body ached in every joint, a reminder of the long day before. Yet, despite her weariness, there was a small spark of determination within her. She reminded herself that she had come this far, and no single mistake, no matter how humiliating, would make her give up. Today she would face the ranch again, face the chores, and continue learning. As she stepped outside, the crisp morning air carried the scent of dew on grass and the faint aroma of hay from the nearby stables. Clara took a deep breath, trying to shake off the tension that lingered from the previous day. Her muscles were stiff, and her eyelids still heavy, but she moved with the quiet resolve of someone who knew that work, no matter how exhausting, could not wait. Walking toward the main yard, Clara noticed the ranch coming to life around her. Horses nickered softly in their stalls, birds chirped in the trees, and a faint clatter of tools signaled that the ranch hands were already at work. She tried to keep her head down, hoping to avoid the sharp gaze of Mr. Harlan. But as she passed the fences, she saw him giving instructions in his usual stern voice. Clara took a deep breath and focused on her own tasks, determined not to repeat yesterday's mistake. Then she saw him, the tall, broad-shouldered man who had watched her quietly the day before. His name was Sam, a cowboy known for his calm presence and steady hands. Unlike the others, he moved with ease, never rushing, never shouting, yet everything he touched seemed to be handled with care. He was feeding a group of horses near the barn, his movements precise and confident, yet there was a softness in his demeanor that immediately caught Clara's attention. Sam noticed her glance and offered a small nod, a simple gesture that carried more kindness than words ever could. Clara felt a tiny warmth in her chest, a sense of relief that someone had seen her not as clumsy or weak, but simply as tired and human. She nodded back hesitantly, unsure if she could meet his gaze fully, but grateful for the quiet reassurance it offered. The day began much like the one before, with Clara moving from task to task. She fed the animals, cleaned the stalls, and checked fences, all the while feeling the weight of exhaustion pressing on her. Yet something had shifted. Sam moved around her, offering gentle guidance without judgment. If she fumbled with a bucket or struggled to tie a knot, he was there, quietly showing her the correct way. He never raised his voice, never scolded her. Instead, he spoke softly, explaining the work and sharing small tips he had learned over the years. At first, Clara was wary. She had been treated harshly so many times before, both in life and on the ranch, that kindness felt almost foreign. She wondered if he would get frustrated eventually, if his patience would wear thin. But day after day he remained steady, a quiet anchor in the whirlwind of her exhaustion and self-doubt. During the mid-morning break, Clara found herself sitting near the fence, trying to catch her breath and steady her tired hands. Sam approached, carrying a small canteen of water and a piece of bread. "Here," he said, offering them with a gentle smile. "You've been working hard. You need to stay hydrated." Clara hesitated for a moment, then accepted the water, feeling a simple gratitude she could hardly explain. There was something comforting in his presence, something that made the aches in her muscles and the fatigue in her body feel a little lighter. She sipped the water slowly, listening to the soft sounds of the ranch around them. The distant clatter of hooves, the rustle of leaves in the morning breeze, the faint chirping of birds. "You don't have to do everything at once," Sam said, his voice calm and reassuring. "It's better to work steady than to rush and risk hurting yourself or the animals." Clara nodded, feeling a small weight lift from her shoulders. For so long she had pushed herself to the point of exhaustion, believing that any pause would be seen as weakness. But in his presence, she felt permission to simply be human, to take a moment for herself without fear of judgment. As the day wore on, Sam continued to move around the ranch, always nearby yet never intrusive. He offered advice when needed, lent a steady hand when tasks required more strength, and shared quiet stories of his own experiences. He spoke of the early days on the ranch, of lessons learned from mistakes, and of the importance of patience and care. Clara listened intently, feeling a growing respect for him. His words were simple, yet they carried wisdom that came from years of experience and a genuine love for the land and animals he cared for. By late afternoon, Clara felt the strange mix of exhaustion and comfort. Her body ached as it always did, but her spirit felt lighter. The fear and humiliation she had felt the day before began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of trust in Sam's quiet guidance. She realized that he had not judged her for her mistake. Instead, he had offered her support and understanding, and in doing so had given her something far more valuable than advice. He had given her hope. As the sun began to sink behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Clara found herself walking beside Sam, carrying buckets of water to the stables. They moved in silence, a comfortable quiet that spoke volumes. Clara felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in months. The harshness of the ranch, the endless labor, the fear of failure, it all seemed more manageable with someone steady by her side. "You're doing well," Sam said, suddenly breaking the silence. "I can see how hard you're working, and I know it's not easy. But you're learning, and you're getting stronger every day." Clara felt her cheeks warm at his words. Praise was something she rarely received, and hearing it from him felt genuine, unforced. She nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Thank you," she said softly. "It means a lot to hear that." They finished their tasks and headed toward the barn to secure the animals for the night. Clara moved with a renewed sense of purpose, following Sam's instructions carefully and feeling the quiet pride of doing something well. For the first time, she didn't feel the crushing weight of doubt pressing on her. She felt capable, even amidst exhaustion, and she knew that she wasn't facing the challenges of the ranch alone. That evening, as Clara returned to her cabin, she reflected on the day. She thought about the moments when she had felt weak, when her body had screamed for rest, and when her confidence had wavered. But she also thought about Sam, the steady, patient cowboy who had noticed her struggle, who had guided her without judgment, and who had offered kindness in a world that often felt harsh. Lying in her bed, Clara felt a quiet gratitude. She knew the days ahead would still be hard, filled with chores, exhaustion, and challenges. But for the first time, she felt that she could face them. She had found someone who saw her effort, who respected her as a person, and who offered support without expectation. That simple presence gave her strength she hadn't realized she was missing. As she drifted off to sleep, Clara allowed herself to imagine a future where she could grow stronger, learn more, and face the ranch life with confidence. She imagined mornings like this one, filled with hard work but tempered with understanding, guided by someone who valued her as a person, and in that quiet hope she found the courage to face whatever the next day would bring, knowing that she was no longer alone. The following days settled into a routine that Clara had slowly begun to grow accustomed to. Each morning the sun rose over the rolling fields, painting the ranch in a warm golden light. Clara woke before dawn, her muscles still sore, but her heart carried a small spark of hope that had not been there before. The memory of Sam's quiet kindness and patient guidance lingered in her mind, giving her the strength to face another day. As she stepped outside, she noticed him already moving about the ranch, tending to the horses with practiced ease. His movements were calm, steady, and confident, and the sight of him brought a small, comforting sense of order to the chaos of chores she often felt overwhelmed by. Sam's presence had become a quiet reassurance for Clara, a reminder that someone noticed her effort and understood the weight of her exhaustion. The morning work began with the usual tasks. Clara fed the horses, refilled the water troughs, and swept the barn floors. Though her body ached, she moved with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt before. Whenever she stumbled or struggled with a task, Sam was there, not to scold, but to guide. One morning she fumbled while trying to lift a heavy feed sack. Instead of raising his voice, Sam stepped in quietly, showing her how to balance the weight and lift with her legs instead of her back. "You're stronger than you think," he said softly, a faint smile tugging at his lips.
You just need to trust yourself a little more.
Clara nodded, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. There was something in the way he spoke, steady, kind, and patient, that made her believe him. For the first time, she realized that strength wasn't just about muscles or endurance. It was also about perseverance, about showing up day after day, even when everything inside her screamed to stop. Over the next few days, the bond between Clara and Sam continued to grow. They worked side by side in a quiet rhythm, tending to the animals, mending fences, and clearing fields. Sam would occasionally share stories of his own life, tales of mistakes he had made, lessons he had learned, and moments when he had felt exhausted or unsure. Clara listened intently, absorbing his words, not just as instructions but as life lessons. One afternoon, after finishing the morning chores, they took a moment to rest by the edge of the pond that reflected the clear blue sky. Clara sank onto a flat rock, letting the cool breeze wash over her face. Sam sat nearby, tossing small pebbles into the water, the ripples expanding slowly across the pond. "You're doing really well, Clara," he said after a moment, not looking at her but letting his words drift through the quiet air. "I can see the effort you put in every day. It's not easy, but you keep going, and that's what matters." Clara felt her throat tighten. Praise was not something she often received. In her life, she had been told to work hard, to endure, but rarely had anyone acknowledged the struggle behind her efforts. Sam's words, simple as they were, felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. She wanted to say thank you, but the words seemed too small for what she felt. Instead, she offered him a shy smile, and he nodded, as if he understood that words were not always necessary. The days continued in this gentle rhythm. Clara began to anticipate the small ways Sam helped her without ever intruding. He would offer guidance when needed, lend a hand when a task was too heavy, and give quiet encouragement. when she faltered. She noticed how he treated the animals with patience and care, how he never raised his voice unnecessarily, and how he seemed to notice the smallest details that others might overlook. Watching him, Clara began to understand that strength could be gentle and kindness could be powerful. One evening after finishing the day's chores, Clara and Sam walked along the dirt road that bordered the ranch. The sun was setting, casting a warm orange glow across the fields. Clara carried a small bucket of water while Sam led the horses back to their stalls. The air was filled with the soft sounds of the ranch, hooves clopping on the ground, the rustling of leaves, and the distant calls of birds returning to their nests. "You've been working hard all week," Sam said quietly, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Don't forget to give yourself a little credit. You're learning, growing stronger, and doing better than you realize." Clara nodded, feeling a quiet satisfaction settle within her. She had spent so long doubting herself, so long pushing herself to the point of exhaustion, that she had forgotten to recognize her own accomplishments. Sam's words reminded her that progress didn't have to be loud or dramatic. Sometimes it was quiet, measured, and steady. As they reached the barn, Clara noticed how Sam always took care of the small details. He checked the horses' hooves for splinters, ensured the water troughs were full, and made certain that each gate was securely latched. Clara realized that part of the reason he had gained her trust so quickly was because he practiced the same patience and care in everything he did. His actions reflected his words, and in that consistency, she found comfort. During the evenings, when the chores were done and the animals were safely in their stalls, Clara sometimes found herself sitting outside her cabin reflecting on the day. She thought about her struggles, her exhaustion, and the moments when she had felt frustrated or embarrassed. But she also thought about Sam, the quiet cowboy who had shown her patience, understanding, and respect. She realized that his presence had given her a new sense of confidence, one that wasn't based on fear or pressure, but on trust and support. One night as the stars began to twinkle overhead, Clara sat on the porch steps of her cabin. She watched the sky, thinking about the journey she had undertaken to get here. Life on the ranch was not easy. It demanded hard work, resilience, and patience. But for the first time, she felt that she could meet those demands. She had someone to guide her, someone to offer reassurance, and someone to remind her that she was capable. The trust she had begun to feel towards Sam was not sudden, nor was it blind. It had grown slowly, built on small acts of kindness, quiet guidance, and consistent respect. He had noticed her struggles without judgment, helped her when she needed it, and treated her as a person worthy of care and understanding. In a world where mistakes were often punished and weaknesses exposed, Sam's steady presence was a rare and comforting light. Clara also began to notice subtle changes in herself. She moved with more confidence, approached tasks with a sense of calm, and allowed herself to pause when her body demanded rest. She no longer feared making mistakes because she knew that learning was part of the process, and that someone would be there to guide her gently, not condemn her. The exhaustion still came, but it was tempered with resilience, and the humiliation of the past day felt like a distant memory, rather than a defining moment. One afternoon, while repairing a fence with Sam, Clara laughed at a small mistake she made with a nail. Instead of feeling embarrassed, she found herself enjoying the moment, sharing a quiet laugh with Sam. He smiled a warm, easy smile, and they continued their work together in companionable silence. Clara realized then that she had begun to feel safe in his presence, not just physically but emotionally as well. The ranch no longer felt like a place of intimidation and exhaustion. It had become a space of learning, growth, and quiet connection. Clara began to anticipate the moments when she could rely on Sam's guidance, and she also began to trust her own instincts more. She learned to pace herself, to observe, and to approach her work with patience and care. Each day became an opportunity to improve, not just in skill but in confidence and self-assurance. As evening fell and the sky turned shades of deep blue, Clara felt a quiet gratitude for the bond she had begun to form. It was not a dramatic or sudden connection, but a steady, reassuring presence that had helped her navigate the challenges of the ranch. She realized that true support often came quietly, in small gestures, kind words, and consistent care. Lying in her bed that night, Clara reflected on the past week. She had faced exhaustion, frustration, and moments of doubt. Yet she had also experienced kindness, guidance, and growing trust. The ranch, which had once seemed overwhelming and harsh, now felt like a place where she could grow stronger, not just physically, but emotionally as well. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel truly hopeful. She knew that challenges would continue to come, that exhaustion would still weigh on her body, and that mistakes were inevitable. But she also knew that she had someone she could rely on, someone who saw her effort, valued her presence, and offered support without judgment. That realization gave her a sense of stability and courage she had not felt in a long time. As she drifted off to sleep, Clara felt a quiet peace settle over her. She was learning, growing, and beginning to trust, not just Sam, but herself. And with that trust came a new kind of strength, one that would carry her through the long days ahead on the ranch. The days on the ranch had become a rhythm that Clara had come to rely on. Mornings were still early, with the sun barely peeking over the mountains, and her body ached from the work she had done the day before. Yet the exhaustion no longer felt crushing. There was a sense of purpose in every movement, a quiet determination that she carried with her as she completed each task. And through it all, Sam's presence remained a comforting constant, like a steady hand guiding her through the challenges of ranch life. One particular afternoon, after a long morning of feeding horses, repairing fences, and clearing brush, Clara found herself unusually tired. Her body was sore, and her eyelids felt heavy. The sun had climbed high, casting a warm glow across the ranch, and even the animals seemed to move more slowly in the heat. Clara had been pushing herself harder than usual, determined to prove that she could handle the work. But now, every muscle ached, and her energy was nearly gone. She stopped for a brief rest, leaning against a fence post, wiping the sweat from her brow. She closed her eyes for just a moment, intending only to blink and collect herself. But the moment stretched longer than she expected. Her body, exhausted from days of hard labor, demanded rest, and slowly, her head tipped forward, and she drifted into a light sleep. It was only a few seconds, or so it seemed, but the slap of the past memory of humiliation returned instantly. Clara startled awake, her heart racing, only to realize she had not been alone. Sam had noticed the moment she began to nod off. Without a word, he moved closer, his presence steady and protective. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, careful not to startle her, and guided her to sit fully upright. His voice was calm and reassuring, carrying the authority of someone who cared deeply for her well-being. "Clara," he said softly, "never again will anyone treat you like that, and never again will you have to face exhaustion alone." It wasn't just the protection or the guidance, it was the care behind them, the promise that she would be seen and respected. Her cheeks flushed, not from embarrassment this time, but from relief. Relief that someone finally understood her struggle, and that she no longer had to face the harshness of the world alone. Sam stayed close as she regained her composure, his hand still near in a subtle gesture of support. "It's okay to rest," he continued, his voice steady. "You don't have to push yourself to the point of breaking. Hard work matters, yes, but so does taking care of yourself." Clara nodded slowly, feeling tears prick at the corners of her eyes. It had been so long since anyone had treated her with patience and understanding. The slap from the foreman, the harsh words, and the embarrassment she had felt the day she first dozed off had left her cautious and wary. But Sam's presence was different. His calm confidence and gentle reassurance gave her a sense of safety she hadn't realized she needed so desperately. For the next few minutes they stood quietly together, the warm sun shining down on them, the sounds of the ranch surrounding them, the soft nicker of horses, the rustle of leaves, and the distant call of birds. Clara felt a calm she had never experienced on the ranch before. It was as if, for the first time, she could let go of the fear of failure, the fear of judgment, and simply be herself. When she finally looked up at Sam, she noticed the softness in his eyes, the genuine care that radiated from him. He wasn't scolding her, nor was he disappointed. He simply wanted to make sure she was safe, rested, and supported. Clara realized then that this was what trust felt like, not blind faith, but a steady understanding that someone had her best interests at heart. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the quiet hum of the ranch. Sam nodded, his expression gentle. "You don't need to thank me. Just promise me you'll listen to your body, okay? Work hard, yes, but rest when you need it."
That's part of being strong.
Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest. Strength wasn't just about enduring pain or exhaustion. It was also about understanding limits, caring for oneself and trusting others when they offered guidance and support. She had learned a valuable lesson that day, not just about the importance of rest, but about the rare and comforting presence of someone who genuinely cared. The days that followed continued in a rhythm of work and learning, but Clara now approached each task with a newfound sense of balance. She still woke early and worked hard, but she allowed herself brief moments of rest, listening to the gentle reminders Sam offered. He would occasionally pass by with a nod or a smile, a quiet way of checking that she was pacing herself, and each gesture reinforced the bond of trust growing between them. One afternoon, while mending a section of fence with Sam, Clara felt a lightness in her heart she hadn't known before. They worked together in silence, their movements coordinated, comfortable, and efficient. The sun cast long shadows across the fields, and the air was filled with the familiar sounds of the ranch. Clara realized that she no longer felt the constant fear of failure that had weighed on her so heavily. Instead, there was a quiet confidence growing inside her, nurtured by Sam's steady presence and patient guidance. As the day drew to a close, they led the horses back to the barn together, moving with practiced ease. Clara noticed how Sam always checked each animal carefully, ensuring they were safe, comfortable, and cared for. Watching him, she understood that his kindness extended not only to her, but to all living things around him. It was a kindness that came from experience, patience, and a deep respect for life. A kindness that had taught her the meaning of true care and protection. That evening, as Clara returned to her cabin, she reflected on the pivotal moment earlier in the week. The memory of nearly falling asleep while exhausted, and Sam's gentle intervention, lingered in her mind. She realized how much it had changed her perspective, not just on work and exhaustion, but on the possibility of finding trust and safety in someone else. The harshness of the foreman's slap seemed like a distant echo now, replaced by the warmth of care and understanding. Clara sat on her cabin steps, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was painted in soft shades of pink and purple, and the gentle breeze carried the familiar scents of the ranch. She allowed herself to breathe deeply, letting the exhaustion and tension of the day melt away. For the first time, she felt a sense of peace that had nothing to do with rest alone. It was the calm assurance that she was not alone, that someone had her back, and that she could trust the presence of kindness in her life. Her thoughts wandered to Sam, the quiet cowboy who had stepped in without judgment, who had offered protection without force, and who had shown her that strength could be gentle. She realized that this bond was becoming something more than mere guidance. It was a connection built on respect, care, and trust, a rare and precious thing that gave her courage to face the long days ahead. That night, as Clara lay in her bed, she allowed herself to reflect on the lessons she had learned. She understood that exhaustion was natural, that mistakes did not define her, and that seeking help or guidance was not a weakness. She also realized that kindness could come in quiet, steady forms, through words, gestures, and presence, and that such kindness could change the way one saw the world. For Clara, the ranch was no longer just a place of hard work and exhaustion. It had become a space of growth, learning, and human connection. The trust she had built with Sam had given her a new sense of stability, confidence, and hope. She knew that challenges would still come, that long days and physical strain were part of life on the ranch, but she also knew that she now had the strength and support to face them. As sleep finally claimed her, Clara felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had found a rare kind of safety, a quiet reassurance that even in the harshest moments, care and trust could exist. The day had been a turning point, a moment when she realized that she could allow herself to be human, to rest, to trust, and to accept help without fear or shame. And in that realization, Clara knew that she was ready for whatever the next day would bring, carrying with her the quiet but powerful knowledge that she was not alone, that she was seen, and that she was cared for. The gentle strength of trust, patience, and understanding would guide her through the days ahead, giving her courage, confidence, and hope for the future. The following weeks on the ranch felt different to Clara. The heavy weight of fear and doubt that had haunted her in the beginning was now replaced with a quiet confidence she had never known before. Each morning she woke with the sun, her body tired but her spirit eager to face the day. The rhythm of ranch life, feeding the animals, checking the fences, tending to the land, had become familiar, manageable, and even rewarding. Clara had learned how to pace herself, to notice the small signs of fatigue, and to rest when her body demanded it. She had discovered that strength wasn't about pushing herself to the brink of collapse, but about balance, patience, and understanding her own limits. And through it all, Sam's presence remained a steady source of reassurance and guidance. He never forced her, never judged her, and never demanded more than she could give. Instead, he walked beside her in quiet support, allowing her to grow at her own pace. One morning, as Clara approached the barn, she saw Sam already at work, checking the horses' hooves and brushing their coats. His movements were calm and methodical, a reflection of his deep connection to the animals and the land. Seeing him there, Clara felt a sense of warmth and comfort. Over the past few weeks, she had come to rely on his guidance, and more importantly, she had learned to trust him. "Good morning," Sam greeted, his voice soft but carrying a familiar ease. "Morning," Clara replied, a small smile on her face. She felt lighter than she had in months, and the small smile was an honest reflection of the comfort she felt in this place. They spent the morning working side by side, repairing a section of fence that had been damaged during a recent storm. Clara moved with more confidence than she had before, tying knots and lifting posts with care and attention. Sam offered guidance only when necessary, allowing her to complete the tasks herself. With each successful action, Clara felt a quiet pride in her work, a sense of accomplishment that came not from approval, but from her own growing competence. By midday, the sun hung high in the sky, casting its warm glow across the ranch. Clara wiped the sweat from her brow, feeling the familiar ache of muscles well used. But instead of discouragement, there was satisfaction. She had completed the morning tasks without feeling overwhelmed or exhausted beyond measure. She had learned to work efficiently, pace herself, and take pride in her efforts. And in the process, she had discovered a resilience she hadn't realized she possessed. Sam watched her quietly, offering occasional advice and encouragement. "You've improved a lot," he said after a moment. "I can see how much stronger and more confident you've become. You're learning fast, and you're doing it well." Clara felt her cheeks warm at the praise. It wasn't that she needed validation from Sam. She had learned to trust her own abilities, but hearing it from someone she respected and admired added a new layer of confidence. "Thank you," she said softly. "I've been trying." "And it shows," he replied with a gentle nod. "Keep going at your own pace. You're capable of more than you realize." Over the next few days, Clara's confidence continued to grow. She began to anticipate problems, make decisions on her own, and help the other ranch hands with tasks that had once intimidated her. She felt more in control of her work, more connected to the animals, and more at ease with the rhythm of ranch life. The fear that had once accompanied every action, the fear of making a mistake, of being judged, of failing, had largely disappeared. Clara also noticed changes in how others at the ranch interacted with her. Where there had once been skepticism or impatience, there was now respect. Her consistent effort, her growing competence, and the calm guidance of Sam had shown them that she was capable and reliable. While she had initially worried about fitting in, she now felt like a valued part of the ranch community. One evening, as the sun began to set behind the mountains, Clara and Sam finished the day's chores and walked together along the dirt path that led to the barn. The air was warm and gentle, carrying the scent of hay and the faint sweetness of wildflowers along the roadside. Clara felt a deep sense of peace. The world that had once seemed harsh and unforgiving now felt full of possibility and connection. "You've come a long way," Sam said quietly, glancing at her with a smile. "Not just in your work, but in your confidence. You've grown stronger than you realize." Clara felt a lump in her throat. "I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted softly. "You showed me how to trust myself, And you showed me that it's okay to ask for help when I need it." Sam nodded, his expression warm. "That's what I'm here for. To guide, to support, and to remind you that you're capable. You just needed to see it for yourself." That night, Clara lay in her bed reflecting on the journey she had undertaken. From the first day she had arrived at the ranch, overwhelmed, exhausted, and unsure of herself, she had grown into a young woman capable of managing the daily challenges with confidence and care. The mistakes, the exhaustion, and even the humiliation of being slapped for nodding off had all been part of the journey. They had taught her resilience, perseverance, and the value of kindness and support. She thought of Sam, and of the quiet moments that had built their bond, the gentle guidance, the words of encouragement, the patient presence that had allowed her to grow without fear. She realized that his steady support had been the foundation for her transformation. She had learned not just to work hard, but to respect herself, trust her instincts, and accept care from someone who genuinely cared. The next morning, Clara awoke with a renewed sense of purpose. The work ahead was challenging, yes, but she faced it with confidence rather than fear. She moved through her chores efficiently, attending to the animals, repairing fences, and tending to the land. With each completed task, she felt a quiet satisfaction, a sense of accomplishment that came from knowing she had grown, learned, and persevered. By midday, she found herself helping a younger ranch hand with a stubborn horse that refused to move. Clara approached calmly, recalling the lessons Sam had taught her about patience and care. Slowly, gently, she guided the horse, using the techniques she had learned. To her relief and satisfaction, the horse finally responded, moving calmly as she had instructed. She glanced at Sam, who watched with a proud smile, and she felt a surge of confidence. She had learned not only from him, but from her own experiences and successes. Over the following weeks, Clara's bond with Sam deepened, built on mutual respect, trust, and understanding. They shared quiet moments after chores, watching sunsets, or tending to the animals together. There was a sense of ease between them, a comfort that came from knowing that each valued the other's presence. Clara felt seen, respected, and supported, a feeling she had rarely experienced before. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, casting golden light across the fields, Sam and Clara paused by the barn, taking a moment to rest. Clara leaned against the fence, watching the horses graze, feeling the warmth of the day settle over her. Sam stood beside her, quiet and calm, his presence steady and reassuring. "You've grown so much," Sam said softly. "I've seen how hard you've worked, how much you've learned, and how you've grown stronger every day. You've proven to yourself and to everyone here that you're capable." Clara smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. "I feel stronger," she admitted, "not just in my work, but in myself. I've learned to trust, to care for myself, and to accept help when I need it. I feel ready for whatever comes next." Sam nodded, a look of quiet pride in his eyes. "That's exactly what I hoped you'd discover. You don't have to face the world alone, and you don't have to doubt yourself. You've earned your place here, and more importantly, you've earned confidence in yourself." As the days passed, Clara continued to embrace her life on the ranch, approaching each task with a combination of determination, care, and newfound confidence. She no longer feared mistakes or exhaustion, because she had learned the value of balance, patience, and support. She moved through the work with skill and calm, gaining not only competence but a sense of pride in her abilities. By the end of the season, Clara had transformed from a nervous, exhausted newcomer into a confident, capable ranch worker. The ranch no longer felt intimidating or harsh. It had become a place of growth, learning, and meaningful connection. She had discovered resilience, patience, and the rare gift of trust and care from someone who genuinely valued her. And though the journey had been challenging, Clara knew that she was no longer defined by fear or doubt. She had proven to herself that she could persevere, learn, and grow. She had discovered the power of kindness, patience, and quiet guidance, and she carried those lessons with her as she faced the future. Clara looked around the ranch, watching the sun set over the fields, the horses grazing peacefully, and Sam tending to the animals with steady care. She felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the work she had done, but for the journey she had undertaken, the lessons she had learned, and the bond she had built. Life on the ranch was hard, yes, but it was filled with meaning, growth, and connection. And Clara, once exhausted and unsure, now felt ready to embrace it fully, with confidence, trust, and hope for all the days to come.